People who have been declared missing for any period of time. What is the story behind it? Serious. When I was 7, I walked home from a family friend's house, and nobody was home, so I went to my next door neighbor's house and watched Pokemon. I was there for about 2 hours. When we see police lights put the window, my parents and grandparents were outside crying, thinking I had been kidnapped. Whoops. When I was 5 or 6, my brother took me to the park to play. While playing, some boys walked up and asked him if he wanted to join the game. So I stayed and played at the park while he was at the field. After the game was over, he walked back to the park, but didn't see me because I was going down a slide, so he ran home thinking I was at home. Meanwhile, the boys he randomly met infiltrated the park and found me just standing there crying. One of the boys was like, "Damn, this fool left his sister." The boys are trying to figure out what to do, so they decided they would find where I lived and take me home. Back at home, my mom has the police there making a report as she's crying her eyes out. While this is happening, she sees this huge gang of boys running up the street with me on the biggest boy's shoulders, running me home. Yeah, my brother is an idiot. That last image is super adorable though. I'm glad they helped you home. First month of kindergarten. Every other day my mother had been waiting at the bus stop for me, but she wasn't able to that day. She reinforced several times the name of our street. "Get off on X Street. Understand? Get off on X Street." I told her I understood, and no way I was disobeying her instructions. We lived only 2 blocks away from the school, and my stop was the first stop. We got out of school at 4 PM and rolled up to the first stop at about 4:05. Only the bus stop wasn't on X Street, it was on Y Street, the street right next to the street I lived on. I knew what my mom had said, so I stayed sitting in my seat as all my friends and neighbors got off. 3 hours later and I was the only kid on the bus. I kept asking the bus driver when we were going to X Street, "Why haven't we stopped at X Street?" He told me that he already had. That was the first stop and I told him that he was wrong. That was Y Street. Anyways, the bus driver took me to the bus stop, and when we pulled up there were several cop cars. They were walking in the woods on my street and a few were at the stop. I got off the bus and my mom ran up to me and hugged me and was crying and told me how scared she was, asking why I didn't get off at my stop. And I matter-of-factly told her that that bus stop doesn't exist and got angry at her for lying to me. I was a really little kid. I was reported AWOL while in the military. My unit was part of Brigade Active Ready Reserve if I remember correctly. Basically, if crap hit the fan, we had to be ready for wheels up in 2 hours. My unit had just come out of the field, showers, see the family, just for a night kinda thing, then back to training. The call came in at 2 AM. Be at the barracks by 3. I was not in my barracks room, nor was I answering my cell phone. In fact, my room was pristine. It looked like no one had even went in there after the field. It looked like I had just vanished after being released at the unit. They were having a huge meeting about it, where I was. Did I just get drunk? Did I have a girlfriend no one knew about? They asked my buddies, etc etc. No one knew. My platoon SGT was my tank commander, so it's not like we were not close, as tank crews usually are. Finally my gunner gets called back from prepping stuff in the motor pool. "Hey, where the frick is TC? Are you serious? You put him on guard duty on the tanks in the field. You put him in the detail." So I was reported AWOL for being on guard duty that was assigned to me, because my platoon SGT forgot he gave me the guard duty. British military here. That sounds so familiar. My mother wouldn't stop abusing me, so I ran away for 2 weeks. I came back to my side of town and there was flyers everywhere. I learned that I could go to jail for being a runaway, so I just went home. Back before the ubiquity of cell phones, people had to be places at specified times or use payphones and hope people were near that particular phone. In 8th grade, I, along with a few other students, were awarded for being on the high honors list for the entire year. The school sent us to do bowling, free lunch and a few other fairly awesome events. But our dim-witted assistant principal forgot that this was going on and couldn't find any of us. She marked us absent, called our folks who all said they had dropped us off, causing Dimmy Dimwitterson to panic. She called the police, said that students were missing and it was serious. The cops came rushing over, began to canvass, called parents and soon realized we were on a field trip. Nonetheless, the cops had to make sure we were okay. We were at an arcade and he just shook his head and walked away. It was kind of cool. When I was 4, I hid under the coffee table in the living room. I thought it was hilarious until the cops showed up. I turned myself in. About 4 hours. The whole town was out apparently. That's amazing determination and patience for a 4-year-old. In 2015 I was 18 and traveling. Me and my friend were going through Asia and got tired of the beaches and hot weather. We decided to go to Nepal to hike in the Himalayas and make our way to base camp. We were on our way to Namche Bazaar when a 7.8m earthquake hit. We got to Namche and the Wi-Fi was down, so we enjoyed some porridge and coffee. We were unable to get Wi-Fi that evening, so me and my buddy decided to go to bed. We woke up the next morning, ate breakfast, and as we were eating we were told the Wi-Fi was back. I think the two of us combined had over 120 personal messages sent to us and were registered on a nationwide Canadian missing persons thing for national disasters. Nepal is about 12 age difference from back home, so as I was going to sleep my family and friends were just waking up to find out what happened. They spent the entire day until about 8 or 9 p.m. their time panicking and worrying while we were sleeping through aftershocks. I was maybe 10 and my stepdad was really mad at me and threatened to spank me or something. Of course I was terrified. So 10-year-old me decided to grab a sleeping bag and my comforter and my backpack with some random crap in it and go camp out for the night. I made it to the beginning of my neighborhood before I got tired and settled down in this little garden area for the night. I slept pretty well, but I was rudely awakened by one of my neighbors who was dropping her kids off at the bus stop. She grabbed me by my arm and put me in her car, next to her kids and my sister and brother who she was giving a ride. She called the police and shouted, "I've found a missing juvenile delinquent." Basically, the paramedics came and stuff and everyone was super worried all night. They said I almost had hypothermia, which was a lie because I was nice and warm in my sleeping bag. Apparently the entire county sheriff's office had been rolling around the town looking for me, but they couldn't find me sleeping 20 feet away from the road in a wide open area. They also used dogs and a frickin' thermal imaging helicopter and still couldn't find me. Also they claimed I had tried to throw them off with candy wrappers in the street somewhere, but I didn't bring any candy with me, so I DK what that was all about. I got to miss a day of school and my stepdad got in a lot of crap for threatening me. It was a pretty fricking weird experience. Calling a missing child a juvenile delinquent is a bit harsh. I was playing in my front yard when one of my neighbors came walking down the street with his daughter. They were on their way to the playground just a block away, and I wanted to go too. So I went with them without thinking of telling my mother where I was going. 1 hour later we were swarmed by police cars. Whoops. It's a little weird that you adult neighbor didn't think to tell your mother where you were going, though. When I was 5 years old, my mom left me at a bowling alley. She thought my dad had taken me, and my dad assumed she had done so as well. We had planned on going for a road trip, 5+ hours. When we were done bowling, they made it 2 states away without either of them asking about me. The staff at the bowling alley were freaking wonderful and gave me all the soft pretzels and coke a 5-year-old could have wished for. I don't remember too much of what happened when my mom picked me up, but do remember my oldest brother hugging and never letting me go. He committed suicide 10 years ago and I miss him terribly. We had a bond no one could break. I am sorry about your brother. Sometimes every few years I like to drop off the radar for a few days and get some time to myself. Being isolated is a good way to clear your mind and disconnect from all the chaos. Sometimes I don't even plan it out. I see how much money or time I have and pick a direction and then explore. Everyone in my family knows I do it every few years and not to worry. Anyways, I told my mom that I would be leaving for a bit and I'll be fine. That I would be gone for nearly a week this time. It turns out I guess she was sleepwalking when I talked with her, so she never remembered the conversation. The small note I left on the fridge fell off and under it. Last but not least, my brother changed phone numbers the day before and didn't tell me, so I sent a message into the void. Anyways, I was gone for about 6 days with some camping and a night in a hotel. It was great and I felt great while doing it. I bought camping gear and some fishing poles and just relaxed or read books. Once it was done, I came back to 2 old friends trying to reassure my mom, who was crying. Then I got screamed at for probably 2 hours while being interrogated by everyone. It was pretty much heck. It took me the rest of the day to make all the random phone calls saying, "Hey, it's me. Yes, I'm still alive. No, that didn't happen. I'm relieved I'm still alive too. Wait, you got rid of my CDs, I'll let you borrow." I guess my friends and mom printed papers, called the police, and told everyone who would listen. The only good news is that the police didn't waste much time because I had a history of leaving for a few days. The worst part? My boss hired a replacement even though I had 6 days off of work. So I had to struggle to piece my hours back by taking other shifts. Basically everyone thought I was dead, and it took a long time to stop running into random people who I don't know saying, "You're alive." The rumors were also pretty crazy. Everything from me being kidnapped to committing suicide or running to another country for murder. I called home on a Wednesday my freshman year. My mom answered and I asked to go to a classmate's house and do a history project. She said yes. Fast forward 3 hours and this girl's mom dropped me off and there are police cars outside. My mother called the police and reported me a runaway. I was arrested, put in handcuffs, and taken to juvenile jail until my mom picked me up a couple hours later. She acted like nothing even happened. I was 5. This was in 1989 in a really bad part of Memphis, TN. My family was super poor and we lived in this projects type apartment block that was like 95% black people. I had this friend who lived a floor up from us and we played together a lot. She was having a birthday party at the McDonald's across town, and her parents were basically just loading all the kids up in a van and driving us there for a couple hours. My parents would always let all us kids wander around town unchecked, so this was practically Alcatraz levels of being chaperoned back then. So we have the party and there's food and cake and we all play in the little inside playground. I was having a freaking blast. Never got to go to McDonald's. It was a big deal for me. At some point, I look up from playing and realize the restaurant looks weirdly empty. Can't find my friend. Can't find her parents. Go outside. Can't find the van. Her family freaking left me there. Later on, our parents would have a huge laugh at how easily I was forgotten since I was the only blonde-haired, green-eyed girl in a sea of black kids. But at the time, it was really scary. I was only 5, so I didn't know how to make a phone call or anything. I just wandered around that side of town until it got dark, and then I went back to the McDonald's and sat in one of their booths and patiently waited. Eventually, an employee saw me sitting there alone and began asking questions. But before they could really get down to hunting for the family, the cops came rolling up to find me. It took like 9 hours for someone to realize I was even missing, call the cops, and unravel the mystery of the last place I'd been seen. Memphis, 1989. Freaking crazy time. When I was in college I had this super competitive metals industrial design major and was living with my then boyfriend's folks at the time, who were really overprotective and convinced that everything outside the suburbs was filled with murder. Understandable, I guess. They had both been social workers on the south side of Chicago for many years. In my major, you needed to log really lengthy hours in the studio in order to access the equipment needed to complete your work. So students working through the night wasn't uncommon. Heck, there was even a cot outside the studio. Anyways, it was going to be one of those long nights and I told them that I would be home when crap got finished. Cue about 36 or 37 hours later and several regular and campus police pay a visit to the studio asking for me, telling me that I had been reported as a missing person and I needed to call the folks. They were peeved, but I was like, dang, I told you I might stay the night. Jeez. I've been heavily independent since I was about 15 and being 21 at the time, the idea of checking in with anyone was a foreign concept to me. I ran away from home when I was 17. My dad had just died and my mother didn't like that I called his abusive crap out. She started verbally abusing me for being a lesbian and got my brother to set me right. He broke my ribs and I fled to another county. I live in the UK to stay with a friend. Whoa, I'm so sorry you had to go through that. I hope you're doing better now. I fell asleep in a cupboard for a few hours. Woke up to the police opening it up. Back when I lived with my mum we were a feral bunch of kids, so I used to keep my toys in there so they didn't get broken. My little brothers couldn't climb the door to get up there yet. Can't remember how old I was, just I know it was before 12 years old. I got this retold to me by my mom a few years back. Some things I remember on my own, but since it's a long time ago I am a bit fuzzy on the details. When I was a kid, 9-10 years old I think, I was sent to the store close to our house to buy milk. Only for some reason I thought my mother meant a store across town, over a main street and railroad tracks. So off I went. So I strolled down to the store, proud to have been given the responsibility of shopping on my own. Bought the milk, got scared of an old lady asking where my parents were, and started going home. Meanwhile my parents got worried. I had been gone way too long for having been to the shop I was meant to visit. Dad went and asked if I had been there. When he heard I hadn't, he went home to tell mom. This was before cell phones were common. They of course got really worried and started searching for me around the road I was supposed to take. This is when my dad meets me strolling up towards our street with the milk I was supposed to buy. After that I was supposedly not allowed to be on my own for a while. When I was a kid, we were camping in I believe Cape May, and I had finally achieved the big boy status of going to the bathroom unattended. It was drizzling, so I donned my electric green and yellow Ninja Turtles raincoat and ventured to the latrine. 3 hours later, after an extensive manhunt by camp employees and campers, my dad and brother found me on a swing set, resigned to my fate of never seeing my family ever again. I literally just gave up after an hour and started trying to cope. The latrine was directly across the dirt road, 10 feet away. I just missed it and walked a mile or two in the wrong direction like an idiot. TLDR. Don't trust alcoholics to remember where you are. When I was 15, I went to trip with a friend one evening. It got to the point where I was not coherent enough to walk home, so I called my mom to ask if I could spend the night. Our roommate answered and told me that he and my mom had gotten into a fight and she left and he didn't know where he was. Given that I was currently hallucinating, it made more sense to stay where I was. I overslept and missed the bus. Someone told my mom that they'd seen me headed to the laundromat with a backpack. She freaked out, rode a trolley to a nearby town, and reported me as missing and possibly kidnapped. I went to check my schedule at work and found out I was even on the news. So I went home and called the cops on myself. I was detained, handcuffed, taken to the juvenile detention center, processed, and released into my mother's custody. She apologized repeatedly because, I was telling the truth, but no one else believed me, including the cops and my school resource officer. Arrested for what? My parents kicked me out when I was a teenager, so I had to stay in a youth homeless shelter for a couple of months. I was planning on killing myself and the shelter staff found out and took me to the hospital. I stayed there for a couple nights and it didn't really do any good. When they discharged me, I ended up wandering around town by myself for hours because I didn't want to go back to the shelter. I kept getting calls from the shelter and my mom, but I just ignored them because I didn't want to talk to anybody except my boyfriend, who was away at university at the time. My mom finally got the idea to call my boyfriend and ask if he had heard from me. Turns out the hospital had called the shelter to let them know I'd been discharged, and when I didn't turn up for hours, they called the police and my parents and everyone was out looking for me. Oops. Was in college and around 20, went over to a friend's house for the night and drank quite a lot. Forgot to check in with my mom. She filed a missing persons report. Embarrassed the crap out of me. At a beach club when I was about 8 years old, I told my mom I was going to go to these swings that were near our cabana. Well, one thing led to another and I ended up playing cards with my friend, who I didn't know was there, in his cabana. My mom, who thought I was at the swings, looked over and didn't see me, so she started freaking out thinking I was kidnapped and such. She managed to gather a search party that went out searching for me in the beach club. I started to walk back to my cabana after 2 hours when I heard over the club speakers, "My name, your mom is looking for you." When I heard that, I hightailed it back to the cabana where my angry mom, who started to yell at me, was. Fun times. Ran off from home one day after a particularly crappy relationship moment and ended up driving to San Francisco and trying to jump off the Golden Gate Bridge. Parents declared me missing and mentally unstable, and as I was working up the nerve to jump and smoking a cigarette while looking down at the waves, A police lady comes up to me and asks, "Hi, are you Name?" At that point I figured I was fricked anyways and said yup. Soon there were 3 cruises on the bridge and I was cuffed and hauled off to a psych ward. I told the doctor I was just there to think about stuff and they let me go after about 7 hours. Decided to just go home after that. Still struggling with those thoughts today but not jumping off any bridge anytime soon. Was technically kidnapped, but people were paid off so I wasn't declared missing publicly. Long story short, my mother did drugs, ended up in federal prison. I was a ward of the state in elementary school and had to live with my paternal grandparents for a while. My real father learned this and came back into my life, only to kidnap me. Really, it was my grandparents letting me go with this insane man so they could collect money from the state without having to take care of me. He pulled me out of the house after a huge fight, where he beat my grandmother. This was all supposedly staged, and drove me to Chicago to live in a family member's basement there. The family had been called by my grandparents and father to let them know he had gotten custody of me and wanted to relocate. Mother made her monthly call and couldn't get a hold of me for the 2nd month in a row, so she convinced the prison wardens that something was wrong. They did a wellness check, and I was missing. Cue grandparents freaking out because we've searched everywhere for her and the SWAT team yet again finding me in a basement in Chicago. Multiple encounters with the SWAT team in my young life. This led to grandparents rushing up there because they were so worried about me and being brought back while being strictly told to tell people I was very sick for 2 months. They paid off the local papers and state so they could keep me and continue getting their money. TLDR. Father kidnapped me. My mother, who was in prison, was the only reason I was found. When I was 4 or 5, my mom got the neighborhood looking for me because she couldn't find me anywhere. I was playing with my sister's Barbies, which I was not allowed to do, so I had hidden quietly in the closet with them. This is a weird story but I'll tell it the best I can. My mom is a waitress at a local restaurant. They hired a new bartender who wasn't very friendly but she knew how to make drinks and showed up for every shift, so they took the good with the bad. I'll call her Jay. My mom is an absolute sin and very welcoming to new people, so they became friends as co-workers but didn't have much of a relationship outside of work. When Christmas time came rolling around, Jay fell into a deep depression and didn't want anything to do with Christmas or the party the restaurant owners were going to hold for the employees. After the holidays were over, my mom pulled her aside and said something like the holidays are tough on everyone but she was there for her if Jay needed anything. She admitted to my mom that she never enjoyed Christmas after the death of her children. She explained that her husband and their 3 or 4 daughters, I can't remember, were in a tragic car accident around Christmas many years before and everyone died in the accident but her husband. She said that the survivor's guilt he was dealing with, coupled with the fact that she could never forgive him for taking her children away whether it was an accident or not, caused irreparable damage to their relationship. Just months after the accident, he moved to another part of the country, Florida, and she moved to Pennsylvania to be close to her family. 10 years after meeting my mom, it was found that the ex-husband made an elaborate plan to fake the children's death in order to gain custody. He never let her see the children's remains because they were so badly disfigured in the crash. He convinced her she would never recover from seeing their bodies. But Jay said there were a funeral for her daughters that everyone attended, and then afterwards she and her husband's relationship quickly fell apart. Her ex-husband's family had the girls the entire time and they convinced them their mom didn't love them anymore and abandoned them to start a new family. That elaborate ruse went along for years until the oldest daughter found out she was pregnant. She felt it had been long enough without any contact with her mother and asked for any information on finding her. The family tried to convince her the mom wanted nothing to do with her or the family, but she kept pushing for any information. Finally, the dad broke down and admitted what he did years ago. His daughters promptly disowned their father and his family and reconnected with their mom. You can understand how confused, upset, surprised she was finding out her life was basically a lie her ex created, but she was so thankful to have her children back. I never saw her as happy as she was when she returned to work after meeting them. When I was in 4th grade, I walked home from school and forgot my keys inside, so I climbed in through a basement window. However, the basement was locked from the inside, so I could either freeze outside or be in my warm basement. About 4 hours later, I was getting hungry and was about to walk to the corner store and get food, only to come outside to find multiple cop cars and both my parents hysterical in front of my house. They thought with the window I left open and my backpack I left outside someone broke in and kidnapped me. The day after I got a flip phone so I could call them whenever I was at home. When I was about 14 or 15, I was on the school bus heading home and chatting with a friend. Since her house was on the street behind mine, I got off at her stop and we sat on the curb out front and continued the conversation. My phone was dead, so I couldn't text my mom to let her know where I was. I didn't intend to stay too long. I was there for an hour. When I finally realized how late it was, I casually strolled home to find my mother in hysterics, having called my phone with no answer, my dad to call me, and the school to find out where I got off of the bus. I showed up at home just before she called the police. I was grounded for a good while and the school implemented a rule where students had to get off at their stops only. Was super tired after work so I went straight to bed around 7-8. It was also a busy day at work so I didn't WhatsApp my family much. Woke up at 2 AM to 100 messages and missed calls and my uncle outside my house because my mom thought I had gone missing. Lives in another country. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.